Now into our second part of non-state actors, and this time we're going to be focusing on Amnesty International. So in the exam, other students would have looked at different non-state actors. So they're going to just refer to Amnesty International as a legal organisation. So that means if you see a legal organisation, think to yourself, this is Amnesty International. It is not. Definitely not ISIS, and if you make that mistake in the first question, you won't get any consequential marks. So legal organisation is Amnesty International. In terms of what our key knowledge is, we look at the aims, roles and power of Amnesty International. Aims, we need to be able to explain the aims and the extent to which the global actors can achieve these aims. We need to be able to explain their role. Evaluate the power. So how does Amnesty have power? How do they not? And then finally, evaluate the extent to which Amnesty International has been able to challenge the sovereignty of other states. And overall, they really haven't. They provide suggestions to states, and states can choose to either take on board the suggestions or just ignore them. But let's get into it. So what are the aims of Amnesty International? Well, their first aim is to ensure every person ensures human rights. And when we're talking about human rights, we're talking about the rights that have been enshrined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So in 1951, the United Nations, when they established an international forum, they came up with basic human rights that people should have, and Amnesty International tried to champion these rights. And they also aim to protect individuals where justice, fairness, freedom and truth are denied. So essentially, really, their main purpose is to protect human rights around the world. We've got lots of examples that we've looked at with Amnesty from throughout the course. You know, with China, we've got examples of them investigating the re-education camps and talking to people who have been tortured in those camps. So they are raising awareness of that. We've got examples of, again, with torture, where they campaigned the Nigerian government to have a man released who was being tortured. You know, they really champion human rights. And there's lots of examples of them throughout our course where they have been involved to try and protect people's human rights. But let's go on to their roles. So what do they actually aim to do? Well, the first is undertake research. So they research, and their research is focusing on preventing and ending human rights abuses. Some of you may remember in Unit 4 when we looked at human rights, that torture, you know, that one of their campaigns is #StopTorture. So to do, and like as part of that campaign, they would have conducted research. You know, they did discover that most, like I think it was maybe 1/3 of countries around the world did use torture. So, but one of their roles there is to research. And in order to do this research, they have to send people into countries to investigate human rights abuses and ask people questions to find out information about it. They would have had to do that with the torture campaign with the re-education camps. You know, they would have had to go in, and we saw that research. You know, they did go and talk to people that had been tortured in these re-education camps, and they got testimonies so that we understand as people what's happened there. So they send experts into countries to understand when human rights abuses have occurred. They also lobby governments, so basically will pressure governments to pressure them to keep and respect human rights law. They will expose what's happening through communication, so through either reports, media, or calling the guilty to justice. It's probably quite a significant part of their job here. They really do expose what's happening, and they make people aware of when there have been human rights abuses. They also mobilise support. So basically, with their 8 million members or supporters, they will get those people to all rally around a campaign, whether it was, to result in Moses being released in Nigeria, or encouraging people to support the campaign to stop a woman being sent to death, in Iran. They will gather their supporters to all rally around a cause and take action. So those are the 4 roles that they undertake. Now, let's talk about Amnesty International's power. You can see here I've got a typo when I'm talking about them. This is clearly not Amnesty International. I was obviously a bit tired when I made this, but so they have indirect support. They've got their members, there's 7 million members around the world, and these people can pressure governments to make changes, or Amnesty International may actually use social media to rally support. If you check on Instagram right now, or I'm sure they've got TikTok, I don't know, but if you check their social media platforms, they would be campaigning for a particular issue. Right now it may be that they may be trying to expose what's happening in Afghanistan, or exposing things and human rights abuses in Myanmar. But they will use social media and to gather support, and hopefully that kind of power with their millions of people that support them on social media will result in them maybe impacting government policy. So they may use social media. They also have been quite notorious for using letter writing campaigns. So that's when, hundreds of thousands of people will write a letter to the government to beg for changes. And we saw this with Moses in Nigeria. Over 800,000 signatures were written for their petition to get Moses released, and he was. Those of you that aren't familiar with this example, having stole a mobile phone, I think, and it resulted in him going to jail. He was sentenced to death, and they were torturing him to get a confession, and so it resulted in him being released after these 800,000 people pressured the government of Nigeria to release him. So this is indirect pressure that they have, or power. They also may actually have the opportunity to meet government officials, and that can result in changes because they may be directly meeting them and be able to pressure them to make change. They also have soft power. So this is good that Amnesty International have this, but basically they will suggest and will encourage Parliament or politicians to make changes. However, they don't have any force or any threats that they can do. They don't have any hard power. They can't really pressure governments to make changes. So that's where it can be a little bit tricky. So sometimes that does undermine their power to make changes and allow their aims to be achieved because they lack hard, forceful power. The only way they can really make change is if governments are afraid of international pressure and, a poor international standing. But you will see with some of these examples that the international community, some countries in the international community, don't care that others frown upon how they treat people. So overall with power, they do have power with indirect or direct pressure, and also through soft power. However, this is sometimes limited if states aren't afraid of having a poor international standing. And without force and without pressure that Amnesty can do, they sometimes don't have enough power to make change. So again, typo. So when we're talking about Amnesty International, we need to talk about how they communicate with people and how they use technology. So their technology has allowed them to engage with all of their members and expand their membership. it's also through the internet has allowed them to communicate with people. You know, they've been able to engage with billions of people through Twitter and Facebook. And they've also been able to engage with people who they probably in the past wouldn't have been able to with. So in authoritarian states like Iran or remote states like Nepal, they have been able to engage with those citizens through the media, you know. So that does allow them to communicate with others. So technology has been good for them. It's allowed them to, you know, obviously rally their members, but also being able to then communicate with people in far off places. They've also been able to engage with politicians who are active on social media. You know, there are many politicians in Australia that are on social media. So, you know, this has allowed them to also understand the issues or understand the perspective of the international community. So overall, the internet has allowed Amnesty International to be able to fulfill actually carry out their roles. You know, they have been able to engage and lobby governments and pressure them to make changes for human rights campaigns. All right, our final point here is how Amnesty has challenged a state's sovereignty. So they have, and they also haven't. There've been some successful campaigns that they have actually been able to do. There are quite a few out there. You probably already have a lot of these in your notes, but through lobbying and letter writing campaigns, they did actually succeed in Eskinder, Niger. I'm trying to think of when this example was, but you can probably go back to your notes for this one. I can't really remember this one, to be honest. But they were successful at that. They've also been successful with Chelsea Manning, who was imprisoned for 35 years for breaching the Espionage Act. However, Obama granted her clemency in 2017, and it did result in her being released. But this was only because of the lobbying that Amnesty International did for Chelsea Manning. So they have been successful in some ways. However, because they lack power, because they lack enforcement and, you know, that hard authoritarian kind of power, you know, they haven't really been successful in some places where they aren't concerned about their reputation in the international community. And this was seen in Iran, where this woman was stoned to death after being accused of adultery. So Amnesty International did petition for her to be released. They had 240,000 signatures to pressure the Iranian government to release her. However, Amnesty International lacked power. They only had suggestive power, so they weren't able to do anything about it. So this did result in her being stoned to death. And so that really shows there that Amnesty International do lack power to actually achieve their aims. You know, they lack power sometimes to stop human rights abuses because they don't have enough pressure that they can give to the international community. They have no force behind what they're doing. All right, so I have done a very speedy overview. I hope that was helpful. If not, you may need to ask me some extra questions about it. But I hope that was helpful. If not, just let me know. Have a great night, everyone, and I will see you later.